What is it like to be an underwater filmmaker and work all alone? I just finished a solo cave diving filming project in Sulawesi and we're going to unpack the solo shooting process together. This is the DiveSAGA Dive Debrief Podcast and I'm your host, underwater filmmaker and scuba instructor trainer Nick de Rooter. Well, hello everybody and welcome back to another episode of the DiveSAGA Dive Debrief Podcast, the podcast companion to the DiveSAGA YouTube channel, and you can of course also find DiveSAGA on Instagram and TikTok, by the way, although I'm not as active there. I just finished a shooting project in Sulawesi in Indonesia. It was a solo project, so I did a solo trip and I shot no less than 7 upcoming episodes for the DiveSAGA channel, and we will of course debrief those episodes specifically once they appear on the channel. That should be around the end of April onwards, but I figured this would be a good opportunity to talk about what it's actually like to travel alone, shoot alone, and try to organize these type of shooting sessions by myself, in case some of you guys are facing the same challenges. It is a commonly requested topic, so I think some of you will probably really enjoy this. Specifically, I would like to talk a little bit about the pre-planning, about all the different roles you take on when you do this alone, task loading, equipment handling, the cost of each of the shots, safety versus the shot, the editing process, and lastly, a little bit about the psychology of solo filmmaking underwater. This episode is sponsored by DSG&x Singapore Ocean Week, the largest scuba diving trade show in Asia. This year's 2026 edition takes place this coming weekend, April 10 to 12 at Suntec in Singapore. And I will be attending and presenting as well. Amongst other topics, I will be talking about underwater filmmaking and I'll be in some panel discussions. So if you're a diver or a diving professional in the Asia Pacific region, you should absolutely consider attending. You can definitely still get tickets to DSG&x Singapore Ocean Week, and I will put a link below. April 10 to 12 at Suntec in Singapore. I'll see you there. So let's talk a little bit about underwater filmmaking solo, and it all starts in the pre-planning, of course, and we've talked a little bit about this in other episodes, but as you might remember, if there is no story, then there is nothing at all. It's not worth organizing a shoot if we have nothing to talk about. So a lot of that happens in the research, of course. Cave diving is cool, mine diving is cool, technical diving is cool, all diving is cool, but we need something, a hook to put our dive on, to write our script around. I usually also need to find out whether a place is visually pleasing, whether it's going to be feasible to shoot there and actually produce imagery. So that means, are the spaces large enough to move a camera around, to place some lights? Is the visibility of decent quality? If you have extremely murky water, it might still make for a challenging and fun cave dive, but it might not be so visually pleasing. So before even considering going somewhere, I have to, of course, list all of that and consider all of that. What is the dive difficulty, right? It may just be above my pay grade, or it may be right on the money, but maybe very difficult to combine that with shooting. I also need to figure out if I know people in the area. So usually I travel alone. Not always. I do sometimes shoot with the same people. I think if you watch the DiveSAGA channel regularly, you've maybe seen CCR instructor Florian Simoens make a regular appearance. But very often I travel alone and I shoot alone. And so I try to see who's in the area that I could team up with, or alternatively, the people I'm diving with, can they provide some type of local insight, some type of local guidance, and are they willing to assist? Because even though it is solo filmmaking, it is of course not solo diving. I would not dive alone. That would be incredibly unsafe. And I will still always need a little bit of help, even if it's just with lighting, for instance, or dive planning. I obviously am not all-knowing and all-powerful, so I will still need help with that. It's also important to figure out sort of what the intricacy of the dive sites are, whether we're going to need one or more dives per site, and then sort of divide that up into shooting sessions and into episodes. And sometimes it's as simple as one wreck per episode or one cave per episode. Sometimes some wrecks are so large or some caves are so complex that more dives are needed, so that needs to then be divided up. And then lastly, I usually try to look at some existing imagery to see what other people have done in those places, to get a sense of scale, to get a feeling for the place. Is it very decorated? Is it very large and wide open spaces? That gives an idea to how much light I might be needing. And also whether I'm going to need to procure extra lights, for instance. For this specific shoot that we just finished in Sulawesi, I actually was able to get the help of Robin Cuesta from Sulawesi Dive Track, who actually provided quite a bit of extra equipment, which was super useful. Now, when you're shooting film underwater and you're doing that solo, you're actually wearing many hats. You act, of course, as a producer. Everything I just mentioned is kind of a producer job, right? Figuring out all those logistics. But you also act, of course, as the writer. You need to figure out what the stories are going to be, which requires a bit of research, a little bit of prep. The more research is done on beforehand, the better, obviously. You're going to be the director, so obviously the style of what everything is going to look and feel like is your job. You are the cameraman. You are the director of photography, meaning lighting and everything is your job. As I said earlier, I sometimes work with people who will hold lights or place lights, but they will almost always do that at my direction. So there as well, you're a director of photography. I'm usually also the model or a model in the sense that I almost always have a very wide angle action camera pointed at myself just to have something to cut away to. We talked about that in previous episodes, that it's if you're diving behind someone, sometimes difficult to cut from one shot to another. And so having a different angle in between, for instance, a selfie type of angle helps, but that also means either way your diving should be up to snuff, but that does mean that you need to be put together well enough to be on camera. And then lastly, I'm of course also the editor. So when everything is shot, I also need to be editing it. So you do need to be prepared that you need to sort of compartmentalize all these different roles. Sure, it's great if a cameraman can think as a director or as an editor. But for instance, while you're diving, while you're shooting, your producer hat needs to be left at the surface. You cannot be thinking about surface logistics while you're underwater shooting. And so that compartmentalization, it's actually rather exhausting. It's something that took me a lot of time to sort of settle into and to realize that I had to be able to let go of certain things and play each role when it was required to be played. Which kind of brings us seamlessly to task loading. Good solo filmmakers aren't just creative, they're disciplined divers first, I would say. I never go dive without a solid, clear dive plan, but when shooting, which is very often, I will absolutely not step a single foot in the water without knowing exactly what we are doing. There is very little room for improvisation, for exploration, when you're already giving so much of your attention to the camera, to lighting, etc. And it's worth knowing that I'm never the dive leader. So it's just, of all the hats that we just mentioned that we have to wear, it's just not possible to also, on top of that, constantly wear the hat of dive leader. So usually I'll find a good local dive leader, somebody who knows the sites well, who also has interesting additional information, but who also can sort of take at least that on their shoulders. Now, I hear you thinking, tech divers, cave divers, there should not be a leader, you should not be following anybody. Well, yes and no, right? If you're in a new place, I think it's very normal to still get local guidance. Yes, of course, you should always be 100% in control of your own dive, your own plan, your own safety. You need to be prepared for a situation where you might need to end the dive alone, whether that is through separation or an accident, that you might need to find your way out alone and do so confidently. So of course that still stands, but the actual leading of the dive, being literally number one, I think is something I like to outsource. Also because it actually gives me a model in front to film, as we talked about before. Now, these dives usually require extreme focus. I mean, either way, cave dives, technical dives, decompression dives, they generally already require quite a bit of focus. Everybody will tell you that adding the camera to that is just the most detrimental, taxing thing you could possibly do, and that is absolutely true. So I will apply a lot of sort of focusing techniques, trying to get as quiet as possible. We've talked about this before, but I'm very known for a few minutes before the dive get going really, really quiet. Sometimes that's mistaken as nerves. With me, it's actually more getting in the zone and sort of freeing up that brain capacity to be processing. I know I'm about to be processing a lot of input all at once, right? Dive decisions, filmmaking decisions, lighting decisions, camera issues. And so to free up as much bandwidth as possible right before the dive is really, really useful. There is certainly absolutely no space, no bandwidth whatsoever to take any surface worries down with you. Like that's just not possible. Of course, during the dive, as much as there is a dive leader and as much as I try to spread my awareness between the camera and the dive itself, there are moments in the dive plan where the camera simply cannot be prioritized at all. So for instance, navigational decisions in cave diving, I think is, for me at least, a moment that absolutely requires the focus. I do keep the camera rolling. That's maybe a little trick. But whenever we make navigational decisions, or we execute navigational decisions that we've pre-made, I keep the camera rolling. I've never had to use this, but I always like to imagine that I'd be able to sort of go back to the footage mid-dive if I really had to. Not that you absolutely shouldn't, right? You shouldn't rely on like recorded information footage to go and backtrack your steps during a dive, but it's just something that I do. Like, it costs nothing, it's digital. I just roll when we set up the jump, or when we just to kind of be able to go back to that. And another thing that I do to sort of manage the task loading, and it's a really weird one, and it's probably very personal to me, but I'm like constantly framing shots during the dive while I have my own voice as a voiceover running in my head. So I'm literally live narrating, like coming up with things to say, whether it's talking about the decorations that we see, whether it's talking about something dive technical that somebody is doing in that moment. It doesn't always make sense. Like if you're able to extract it out of my head and put it as a voiceover, it would be very unguided and very fragmented. But it's something that helps me focus on everything, because I sort of narrate everything that's happening as it's happening. It's incredibly taxing to do that, but it makes that my mind is hyper aware of everything that's going on, because I am literally narrating what's going on. So I don't know if that works for other people. Maybe if there's other filmmakers here listening, do you do that too? I'm very curious. I've never asked anybody that, but it is basically, if you could cut open my head and listen to it, it would be like a constant stream of narration. And yes, that narration is in the DiveSAGA voiceover style. Equipment handling is also incredibly taxing, both out and in the water. My hotel room looks like a logistics hub. So there is like 10 different chargers all hooked up, camera batteries for the Sony, for the Insta360 cameras. The monitor is being charged, dive lights are being charged, dive computer is being charged. The camera housings are drying out, so they're like spread around. The AC is running. There's I'm backing up footage, so then I have, of course, all the different cameras, all the different footage every day needs to go on external hard drives in different folders, usually with a little bit of explanation of what it was. because there is after a week of shooting, there is absolutely no chance in hell that I'm going to remember what everything was, much less be able to sort of parse through all the footage. So I need to catalog that every evening right away. So a lot of time on site as well goes to equipment logistics, right? If you're a diver, which you presumably are, then already you know that on site, arriving there, setting up your equipment takes a lot of time. Now it's also setting up cameras, setting up lights, and then filming all that. So I find that probably the most taxing moment of the whole shoot is getting the shots of myself setting up the equipment, getting the shots of myself getting in the water, etc. Because those are moments that any diver should be focused completely on the dive. And I even advocate for that so much in other podcast episodes, right? Getting in the zone, being in the zone. And so while doing all of that, also placing the camera, rolling the camera, that takes a lot. The only sort of hack that I found for that is to just slow that process down by a lot. So where maybe people will take half an hour to set up their equipment and get to the water, I'll take an hour, right? I'll take an hour and a half, because the story is still incomplete. We can't just suddenly be in the water. There always needs to be a little bit of that. People enjoy seeing that as well. But setting up your equipment and focusing on that process and making sure it's done well and that everything works, while also making sure you shoot it and making sure that that's done well and everything makes sense, that's a lot. So it's something. Yeah, I don't know if anyone is aware of that, but more than the underwater parts, I find those the most difficult ones. And you can actually see that if you go through some of the episodes, you'll see that those moments can be very rushed in the edit because I simply don't have that much footage. I bring multiple cameras for backup, so it's not uncommon to have one or more camera issues. So just now here in Sulawesi, it's near 100% humidity. So for instance, the camera's fogging up, for instance. It's preventable, but not always. Or just little issues. Like on the last dive, for instance, I had a lens issue. Like the camera worked perfectly, everything was tested, get in the water, switch on the camera again, and for some reason it doesn't recognize the lens. Then luckily I still have two more cameras, albeit smaller action cameras, but as a backup to get the job done still. So usually I have one big camera, the Sony FX3, and then at a minimum two Insta360 Ace Pros hanging somewhere, just to make sure. I mean, once we're there, right, we're so invested, we're so deep in, I need to make sure that we come home with some shots. And then, of course, bring as much light as possible on the dives. Without overkill, of course. I mean, whatever is necessary for the size and type of space you're trying to shoot. But make sure you have all that light. And I try to put it on other divers as much as possible. Also because I think, and we talked about this before, but just hanging two video lights next to your camera is not the best setup, especially in like, for instance, cave environments where you can sometimes get a bit of murkiness, a little bit of silt. You're just going to get a shot full of backscatter. So usually it's nice that if the light source is elsewhere, usually my number one will hold a 20K, a 30K with a diffuser that can light up the scene. Sometimes we'll strap it to someone's butt, so there is like a nice light source behind them. I'll still have two video lights on the main camera, but I'll point them away. So I'll point them up at the ceiling, for instance, just to create a little bit of bounce light. But in general, like, most of the light is on other people, and they do need to be briefed on what to do with it, but it does, again, reduce the task loading ever so slightly during the dive. Now, there is something that I call the cost of the shot. Like, every shot has a real cost to it, not just financial. Of course, the dives cost money. I generally do pay to make these episodes. But every shot also has a cost in terms of time spent underwater, and therefore you getting colder. Time spent underwater, and therefore gas being consumed. and of course time spent underwater and therefore decompression times being racked up. So every shot has a significant cost that way, which means that every second take or every third take of a shot is a significant expense. And where again, maybe in a studio you might say, okay, you know, the setup is here, let's quickly shoot a second take, let's shoot a third take, and that's relatively inexpensive, although not endlessly so. Underwater, because you are going against a ticking clock, a retake of a shot you already have but you're not sure whether it's really good or not is a significant expense. Because of that, you need to be very economical with your shots. You need to be in a way kind of shoot the bare minimum necessary to be able to still maximize the story that you can tell. So I simplify it by a lot. I basically try to shoot it as simply as I can. And yes, that's a big constraint, but it makes you a better storyteller, right? If you can get something across with less angles, with less cuts, with less complexity, with less lighting tricks, then I think you're a better storyteller for it. In the most extreme cases, sometimes another dive is absolutely necessary. We do a dive, it maybe didn't work out, or the shots didn't turn out as good as I thought they were going to be, or we had equipment issues. Sometimes you just need to do the dive again to shoot the episode again, or to shoot additional footage. I had to do that at one point this week, for instance. And that's an expense, but it's either you completely just toss the episode in the bin and that's it then, or you double down because you think it's going to be good. Again, that's a call that you have to make, right? Now, safety is of course key. I can't believe that we've gone this far into the episode without talking about it, but at the end of the day, the most important tension is between keeping it safe and getting the shot, right? We've talked about that before as well, I think, where of course safety is priority. There are situations where the shot looks amazing and I'm looking through the monitor and we're shooting, we're rolling, and it's looking fantastic, and I can just feel the conditions deteriorating, right? Like maybe you get like a little bit of percolation turns into like sort of half the ceiling coming down, or at least it feels like that, where you start thinking, okay, I need to increase my line awareness because I feel like we're about to lose visibility. Things like that happen more often than you think, especially if you need to sort of do something a few times in the same spot. Conditions do start sliding, and it's always important to prioritize getting out of there, right? No shot is obviously worth compromising the exit or compromising the deco, but being a solo shooter means that nobody is really there to pull you out of that tunnel vision. Of course, like I said, I do work with local dive guides, dive leaders who know the environment, but unlike in films where, you know, the producer and the director is like typically the one who calls the shots, in diving and in solo underwater filmmaking, the models or the dive leaders, whoever are being filmed, should have just as much agency as calling it as you do. And it's a bit of a fallacy, I think, where when we're on a shoot, people will often turn to me and sort of think like, okay, can we go, or do you want another one? And it's incredibly taxing to be the one who has to make that call, when it's not just about whether the shot was good, but about whether we should get out of there or not. And so it's important to brief the whole team that, just like on other dives where anybody can call any dive for any reason at any moment, in the shoots, anybody can call the shoot for any reason at any moment, especially when, you know, like on this trip, it's just me. I fly in here, I meet these people for the first time. They know that the mission brief is, okay, we're going to shoot episodes and you guys are going to do whatever needs to be done to facilitate that. It's still important that they understand, like, yes, but you can press the red button at any moment. So as much as we've said it before, where safety obviously takes priority, it is, when you're operating solo, important to realize that you give agency to the whole team to call it at any time. The editing process is very variable. So sometimes I'm super excited to edit a specific episode, and sometimes I'm really, really dreading it. And it's almost always directly correlated to the quality of the dive. Obviously, the more successful the shoot was, the actually also maybe the easier the shoot was. Like if the footage flowed easily, everything just worked out really well, then I typically look very forward to the edit, because I know it's going to be very straightforward, ABC, stitching everything together, and the story is going to tell itself. Some dives that are more difficult, or where we had to do redos, like actual second dives for the same shoot, where there's now 2 sets of footage, it gets a lot more complicated, or sometimes maybe where the story isn't so clear, or the dive environment isn't as picturesque as maybe we had hoped, then sometimes it's really, really work, and you have to edit very hard to like filter a story with decent footage out of it. I have an episode coming up this Thursday about the Song Hong sinkhole in Thailand, which is generally known for having really clear water. But unfortunately, we had really bad conditions. The visibility was really not that good. We were maybe a little bit under-equipped in terms of light as well. So the shoot was just generally maybe not the best that it could be. And so then it takes quite a lot to like save that in the edit. And it takes sometimes double or triple the amount of time that it would take to shoot, or to edit rather, any other episode. But it's in the edit, of course, that the story is found. Of course, research after the fact is not as good as research before the shoot. I try to research as much as I can before, because then I can also record statements on camera in the location. So I can talk directly to the camera, which adds a lot of life to the shoot versus just a voice over. But it also takes a lot more preparation, and there again, like having a successful shoot where all of that took place, it makes editing a lot easier afterwards. Sometimes it's the story is saved, sometimes it's like, okay, you know, I thought the dive wasn't great, but we managed to make something out of it. Sometimes it's totally lost. So it's happened once or twice where I shot entire episodes, came home, looked at the footage and said, you know what, I'm afraid it's a write-off. Nobody's going to watch this, or it's simply not as good as I want it to be. With all that, in the edit, the geography of the dive site also needs to make sense. And since I'm the only person on the shooting team, that means I usually have to take a lot of notes of like the geography of everything. Like the navigational decisions we made, or, you know, even like a little cave map or whatever. I don't know if viewers really notice it, but I think it's important that it still makes some kind of sense. And lastly, it's the pacing, right? You can edit an episode like that and make it 5 minutes long, and you can make it 20 minutes long. Lately, I've been experimenting a lot with making longer episodes as per popular request. However, longer episodes means holding shots for longer and banking on the fact that people won't zone out during it, right? So that they won't find it boring. So if you're a solo shooter, again, I find that hard to gauge. Like, I'm the one who shot it, so I saw all the context that you don't necessarily see on camera. So when I watch the footage, I feel so much more than what maybe a viewer feels when they just watch the image as is. So it's hard to not have that feedback during the edit of whether it's too slow, it's too fast. And lastly, there is the psychological factor of doing it all alone. It can be an incredibly lonely process. It's not necessarily a bad thing. Like, I'm a pretty much a lone ranger. Like, I'm okay with the idea of, I spend a lot of time alone regardless, and I do a lot of things alone, and I'm very much okay with that. But of course, it does mean that you don't have like your posse, so to speak, around you to help you, support you, back you up. So when I arrive somewhere, for instance, to record those in-camera talking heads where I'm talking to the camera, I find it still incredibly daunting to do that in front of new people that I just met, right? If I just met the dive guide or whatever, and I say, hey, sorry dude, I'm gonna record quickly, it's It feels incredibly egocentric to me to do that, and I still have kind of a fear to do that. And I think if you have like 2-3 people of your own crew around you who know that that's how it works, it's a little easier. But if you're all alone in a new environment, it's at least for me not my cup of tea to do that. But you have to get over that, and you have to. One of my tricks is after day one, I always make a point of sharing my footage or some of the best shots with the new dive team as fast as I can, just to like show them like, look, this is what you've helped create. This is what we're doing. This is the level of quality, in hopes, and usually it works, that they sort of see what the mission is and they're more on board. They're like, oh yeah, we're not wasting our time, like we're creating something cool. And that usually gets people excited and gets them on board as well. So even sometimes in the car or whatever, like on the way home from the dive, I'll just quickly load a few shots onto the phone, quickly do some minor color grading on them just to show. And people generally respond very well to that. That gets them on board. What's also a little bit heavy is that they're very long days. Again, because you don't have a team, you are wearing all those hats that we mentioned earlier. You are doing a lot of those things sequentially throughout the day by yourself. So during breakfast, there'll still be like some dive planning or some planning of shots. As I mentioned earlier, setting up all the equipment while filming on site is probably the most taxing part. Then being absorbed during the dive, both on the dive technicality but also on the shooting. Then coming out, getting to the room or whatever, like immediately starting to charge batteries and keeping that organized, making sure you don't miss anything, offloading and organizing all the footage, and doing again the research or rereading the research for the next day. So the days are basically from the moment you wake up to the moment you go to bed. So about a week of shooting. Like now I did 6 days. We actually shot 7 episodes in 6 days, a new record. But that is, after that, I'm totally empty. I love doing it, but there is a clear expiration date to like how many days in a row you can do that. And it is lonely, right? It's having nobody to tell you otherwise sometimes, like nobody to stop you from doing stuff, or nobody to brainstorm with or find new or maybe better ways of doing things. Film is a collaborative art, right? And I do think that film is made better together, but it's simply not always possible. For the level that the DiveSAGA channel is at right now in terms of revenue, it is not even breaking even just to support me doing it, let alone bringing a crew along. So for now, it just is what it is. But it is also liberating in a way. I think, heading for a week all alone to Indonesia, not knowing anybody, language barriers, walking through the jungle or climbing into a dive site. It's a little bit like climbing a mountain alone, right? Or it's a bit like going on a retreat alone. You do get a great sense of personal achievement from that. You always grow. So during any of those trips, I always feel like I come back a little bit better than at the start of the trip. So for me, it's absolutely worth it. And I hope for you guys too. I hope you like seeing these episodes, and I hope you like diving with me in a sense during those episodes. Those are my 2 cents on the process of solo underwater filmmaking. Guys, I want to give you a quick reminder about ADEX Ocean Week in Singapore this coming weekend, Friday through Sunday, April 10 to 12. I'll be there. If you're in the region or if you're in Singapore, absolutely come say hi. If you can't, I will of course put some of the talks on the YouTube channel after. Make sure to follow the DiveSAGA YouTube channel and Instagram page. Thank you guys for listening, and I will see you next time.